protecting your data, reducing your costs, securing your future. MagStor's engineering investments deliver real-world solutions like patented Thunderbolt and NanoPure media solutions, along with tape libraries like the Petabyte Machine and S3-enabled storage. Since 2006, we've been on a singular mission to provide the lowest cost per terabyte for archive storage that is both reliable and immune to cyber threats.
Welcome to the MagStor podcast, where we explore the latest innovations in tape-based data storage. I'm your host, Pete Paisley, and today we have an exciting two-part conversation with David Fox, product evangelist for Archiware, diving deep into their new version 8.0 release. Archiware is a recognized leader in data protection and archive solutions, particularly in the media and entertainment space, and version 8 brings some game-changing features to the table. In this first part, we'll explore 4 major innovations. The new P5 Synchronize functionality that enables seamless cloud replication, the EDL restore capability that's revolutionizing project-based recovery, and an enhanced dashboard feature for resource management, and the introduction of LTO hardware encryption for robust data security. Whether you're managing petabytes of media assets or looking for enterprise-grade data protection, this conversation will give you valuable insights into how Archiware is here to stay in front of what's possible with modern data management in media and entertainment. Let's dive in with David Fox. Hi, I'm joined today by David Fox, product evangelist for Archiware. And we're here today to talk about the newest release from Archiware, 8.0.
Hi, Pete.
David, nice to see you.
Nice to be here with you.
Thanks for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
So I wanted to jump in and talk about some of the highlights I read about with the new release. One of the new features mentioned is P5 Synchronize. It's been updated, and it now delivers full cloud connectivity in both directions, and says it enables seamless replication and protection of assets across on-prem and cloud environments. So maybe you could talk about that and the new use cases that opened up for Archiware users.
Thanks, Pete. Good question. So yeah, we talked about this at some length in the webinar that we just did a couple of days back that was introducing what's new in this version. So I spent some time with the Cloud Sync setting the scene a little bit, because Archiware has long since done backup and archive to cloud storage. And when we say cloud storage, we mean, all of the usual vendors that do object store, and you can create a bucket and give them a payment method, and they'll charge you for what you're using. So for years now, we've got our P5 backup. So the product is Archiware, right? The vendor is Archiware. The product is P5. We have P5 backup and we have P5 archive. And those two products can do backup and archive to cloud storage, but they do various things to enhance that experience. So the main two things are, when you're doing a backup to the cloud with P5 backup, we have a local database that we track everything that we've written to the cloud storage. So that means that if you've got 2 million files in your backup on your storage, and you come to do the day 2 backup, right, where we just want to identify what's different, with P5 backup, we just compare the 2 million files on the storage with the database, P5's database. That interaction is very quick because everything is local. And then if we discover that there's 200 files that have changed or are new, then we just copy those up to the cloud, and we didn't have to do the comparison of millions of files between the local storage and the cloud storage. So that happens with P5 backup and archive. And the other thing that happens is that if you've got lots of small files, P5 doesn't put lots of small files in that cloud bucket that it is over there where my hand's going. It bundles them together into what we call containers. So it zips and bundles files together, and then it puts those in the cloud, puts these containers in the cloud. So all of this is great because it's optimizing these workflows for the cloud, except when people look in that cloud bucket, and they're expecting to see the files that they archived or backed up off their storage, right? They're expecting to see MP4 files and JPEGs or whatever, folder structure that they understand. That's not what they'll find in the cloud bucket, because we've organized and compressed and bundled together and so on. So what they see in the cloud is actually just P5 gobbledygook. It doesn't represent the original file system that they archived or backed up. So in most cases, people should use backup and archive because it's much more optimized for cloud storage. But if the customer really needs that one-to-one, where I've got a file on my local storage, I want to see that in the cloud bucket, then they can now use our cloud sync function, which does exactly that, right? So it's just a one-to-one. You give us some folders on your storage, you give us a cloud bucket and a path in that bucket, and then we will copy everything up. But the second time we run, we'll compare what's there with what's local, and then we'll figure out what the differences are. But of course, if we're talking millions of files, then millions of comparisons is millions of API calls, and it's latency and it's slow. And some vendors charge per API call. So if you make too many hundreds of millions of those, you'll start to see that costing you money just to do the comparison. So there's really got to be a need to have that one-to-one relationship between your local storage that you understand, folders and files and so on, and needing to have a replication of that in the cloud bucket. So in most cases, that's not what our customers need, but they've been asking for this for a while. So it fits into a broader workflow where a customer might have different locations. So I'm in the UK, so let's say London, Manchester, New York, post-production company. They can use P5 Synchronize the regular way to replicate files between different storage, different SANs and NASs at those different locations. But at the same time, if they want to have a folder in New York that they would need to appear in a cloud bucket in AWS, they can do that as well. And we think use cases for this are the ones where you specifically need to have the customer's files in the cloud bucket, because you've got a workflow that picks that stuff up and goes and does something else with it.
Right.
Because in most cases, if people want to use cloud storage as their shared storage, then there are products that do that and present cloud storage locally on your desktop, things like LucidLink I'm thinking of off the top of my head, because that's something that we work quite nicely with. So if you want to use cloud as shared storage between different offices, then something like LucidLink, and there are others, Dropbox have a business thing, is the way to do that. But I think what we're thinking of for our customers is cloud workflows, also handoff. So sometimes clients need to deliver a project, a bunch of files to a client, and they're given an S3 target to put it in. So we could do that kind of thing. One of the things that we were discussing the other day was repatriation, though. So if a customer has already got lots of their own files and folders in a cloud bucket, but that don't like the costs or whatever, they could use our tool to pull all of those files and folders back to local storage on-prem, and then maybe archive that to cold storage using LTO. And they can do all of that within P5. So we have so many different ways that we can work with LTO, cloud and disk storage that it can be a bit head spinny sometimes, because we have backup, archive and replication. But I think for a while now, the missing piece on our replication side has been the ability to just replicate a folder to a cloud bucket, because there's a simplicity to it that everybody can understand. Customers, when they do a backup, when they're looking for a backup software to back up to the cloud, that's what they think is going to happen. They think their files are just going to show up when they're browsing their cloud bucket in their Wasabi or their AWS interface. And oftentimes, when they understand why P5 Backup, P5 Archive does things the way it does them, then they realize that is what they want. They want the reduction in latency. They want the compression. They want the... brain's gone blank. What was the other one? The reason they want the... Yeah, they want the compression. They want the advantages that I just talked about how we kind of have a specialized way of doing this. So yeah, we now have this additional way to do it, Pete.
Yeah, and I find the repatriation use case interesting So conceivably, they could repatriate that data back to LTO-8, for instance, in a new backup, essentially, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So they could set up one workflow to pull the data from the cloud down to local storage. And, if they don't have enough local storage to do the whole lot in one go, then they could, pace themselves, stage it, and then simply archiving using P5 to an LTO library or drive of whichever generation makes sense for them, whatever they want to use.
And I was thinking I could see where business rules might say that after 5 years, we're going to repatriate that data back to our on-prem tape for long-term storage. We don't see much need for access to those projects or that data, and I'll keep my cloud storage optimized for more accessible stuff, something like that.
Yep. And whatever you're doing with P5 Synchronize, there are filters that you can use. So rather than copying everything that we find in the location, you can filter based on dates and so on.
Yeah.
So that you can be selective about what you're moving around. Yeah.
So I also wanted to ask about the new EDL restore functionality. P5 Archive supports EDL, OTIO, AL formats to facilitate project-based recovery. This is new in version 8, right? What use cases are enabled here?
So this is all about our media and entertainment customers who have edit workflows where they're using what's called an NLE, non-linear editor, like Premiere, Avid, Final Cut on the lower end, and so on. So at the end of the day, all of these editing softwares, they give you a workflow and a UI to arrange your video clips and chop them up and put them in a certain sequence and so on. And what we're doing with EDL is a way of describing your timeline, right? So it's an edit decision list or open timeline, OTIO. I don't know what IO stands for. There's a Final Cut one and so on. And they're all basically an export to say these are the clips that we used on the timeline, which segments of the clips, in which sequence and so on. So for a while, again, it's been a customer kind of push. The customers have been asking for EDL support. And the way that works with an archive software such as ourselves is that it allows customer to build a restore of the original high-res footage that was archived to tape from a timeline. So it allows a workflow where a load of big, heavy 6K camera footage comes in that's been shot. You're probably going to make proxies from that because they're much quicker and more lightweight to work with. You don't necessarily want to keep all of that high-res footage on your edit storage because edit storage is expensive and you don't want to clog it up. So you might push that to a tape library, use the proxy workflow for the editing, but at the end of the edit, there's something called a conform, which is where you replace the proxies with the high-res media that's on tape. So with an EDL file, or one of the various different file types that's basically the same thing, you can take the timeline or timelines, make EDL files, and now you can drag and drop those into P5 where you've archived, and we'll build a restore directly from the EDL file. So we'll search the index, we'll tell you if all those files are found, and if not, there's some tweaky things you can do to change the way that paths are handled. And then we'll restore it back, and then you can do this conform step and get your project output with your lovely 6K footage that you shot in the cameras. So yeah, it's a nice workflow.
Yeah, so that way, if only 50% of the clips originally shot were used in the timeline, only those need to be restored, right?
Exactly, yeah, because I think often there's a lot of small, short clips. There's lots of B-roll stuff that doesn't actually make it into the final edit. It's like maybe 20% often makes it into the final edit. So that other 80%, you've still got it. It's on your cold storage. It's on your tape. It's on 2 tapes. You've got it redundantly stored. It's safe if you ever do need it. And if somebody wants to go and do a different edit and do a different version of the show, they make a longer version or whatever, they can do that. They can do another EDL and then it will restore what's needed. It's important to point out that when we're restoring a video file from an EDL, although the EDL gives us the cut points on the file, like, it's an hour long, but just the first 10 minutes, we always restore the whole file. from the EDL. So we don't do like a transcoding of the file and just give you the 2 minutes that you actually used on the timeline, because in order to do that, we'd have to recover the whole file from tape anyway. And then we'd have to use some tool to kind of transcode it down to the bit that you need. So we don't do that. We give you the whole file, which is simple and reliable way to do it.
How were editors kind of dealing with this before? Were they actually backing up all that extra footage just to keep it simple,
Yeah.
or were they having to twiddle with?
I think often they would just restore all the footage.
Yeah.
And then do the conform and then probably delete it again.
Yeah.
Because it's quicker to do that, try to work out which things you need to restore, because there's just no automation behind it.
Yeah.
So you just end up using a chunk more storage and time to restore than you really needed to.
So this will not only reduce the amount of archive storage you're using, but also speed things up, it sounds like, as the...
Yeah, speed things up. And, it's kind of squares the circle a bit in terms of edit workflows. A lot of, the majority of the P5 archive customers are doing editing, post-production and so on. So they're using this kind of software.
And with the formats you're supporting, the different EDL formats you're supporting, do you feel that covers a large percentage of the installed base?
Yeah, a lot of this has come from customers that were asking for it. What Archiware tends to do is goes back to those customers and said, hey, you've been asking for something, so let's talk about what exactly it is that you need, and then it'll be implemented and they'll test it. So the customers that asked for it, all of the file formats that they were using have been covered. Archiware expanded it out a little bit so that you can just use a CSV file. When you archive data using P5, you can actually get a CSV of what you archived out as a kind of record of that particular archive. So you can put that CSV back in just to restore what you archived at that particular point in time. So it enables some other little workflows like that as well.
Protecting your data, reducing your costs, securing your future. MagStor. Visit us at www.magstor.com